They don't honor the one who lingers, not the forgiver, not the explainer, not the one who hopes their worth will one day be seen. The world kneels not to kindness, but to mystery. Respect is not born from proximity, it's triggered by disappearance. The moment you go quiet, vanish without drama, and let the silence echo louder than your words ever did, the atmosphere around your absence begins to shift. Why does leaving spark reverence? Because staying too long reveals hunger. When you remain after being slighted, you're not enduring, you're advertising. You're telling the world, I am negotiable. And even if they never studied economics, they know the laws of demand. What's always there loses value. What's rare earns reverence. Explain yourself too often, and you become common. Fall silent, and you become sacred. That's what Machiavelli observed in the royal courts. Flatterers were everywhere, but the ones who withheld approval held real sway. People are visual. They judge what they can see. When you stay, they see you cope. When you leave, they feel your absence. Vision fades, impact lingers. Every toxic relationship is a test lab. They hurt you, study your response, adjust their tactics, and hurt you again. You reply with long texts and apologies, fuel for the next experiment. But one day, you stop reacting. You shut the lab. No warning, no final speech, no loud goodbye, just silence, just exit. Suddenly, they're the ones confused. The ones scrolling your feed, checking if someone new has replaced their space. But what terrifies them most isn't a new lover. It's the suspicion that you finally learned to enjoy your own company. There are always two roads after disrespect. One leads to begging, over-explaining, and emotional dissertations that end with a one-word reply. The other is colder. You don't delete the chat, you ignore it. It becomes a tomb. And silence becomes your closing argument. Walking away isn't tantrum, it's governance. It's setting new lines around your kingdom. Every step you take away from chaos draws a clearer border around your dignity. Trespassers won't find you, they'll find echoes. Echoes don't beg, echoes don't bleed. They'll say you're heartless when you stop explaining. They'll say you've changed when you stop tolerating. But what you've really done is recalculated. There's a cost to compassion when it's spent on people who treat your kindness like credit. Another loan they'll never repay. Forgiveness is not a public offering, it's a private decision. A transaction made in silence, never broadcast, never lent out again. Stubborn, they'll call you. Let them. Granite doesn't bend to opinion. Softness is easy to exploit. Stillness is harder to decode. They will call your withdrawal dramatic, immature, selfish, because they're starving for the attention you used to give so freely. Understand this. The moment you stop dancing to their dysfunction, you become a threat. Silence isn't sulking, it's precision. It's bandwidth reclaimed. It's the space you use to examine the cracks that let their weight settle in the first place. Ask yourself, what part of me believed I deserved this? Then seal that fracture with the cement of self-awareness. Soon enough, they'll test your distance. A casual meme, a happy birthday text, a song you once shared, breadcrumbs. Don't bite. Every response you offer is a reverse withdrawal, money back into the same broken account. Don't cash in respect only to trade it back for attention. Machiavelli said fortune favors the bold, but boldness isn't always noise. Sometimes it's quiet exit. Sometimes the loudest declaration is no reply. Silence creates two outcomes for them. They reflect or they unravel. Reflection may lead to growth, but that's their job, not your responsibility. If they spiral into confusion, slander, or rage, that's just their fear dressing up as offense. Note how fast they'll repaint you as the villain. That speed tells you everything. They didn't love you. They needed to control you, and now they can't. That's the real heartbreak. A few may evolve, They'll recognize their failure, transform and approach with humility. These are rare. Let them prove themselves at the new gates. Gates you built with lessons, not nostalgia. The rest will loop through apologies and promises as cheap as they are empty. A promise costs them nothing. Believing it will cost you peace. And the spectators, the mutual friends, the relatives, the distant colleagues, they'll judge you by headlines, not history. Let them. You're not building sandcastles for gossip. You're building stone fortresses no tide can touch. Within your walls, life refocuses. You redirect all that wasted energy, those hours decoding mixed signals, into discipline, study, health, craft. You don't tweet about growth, you embody it. Months pass. They check your name, expecting drama, and find peace instead. And that stings more than any insult, because it confirms what they feared. You never needed them to begin with. Marcus Aurelius said, "Be the man you want to argue about." Walking away is how you stop negotiating your worth and start proving it. You don't draft essays defending your value, you live it. And that demonstration echoes louder than 1,000 explanations. The insecure call it arrogance. Critics will whisper, "Isn't this just pride?" Yes, it is. But it's the kind of pride that protects. Healthy pride is knowing your soul has a price tag no one can haggle. False humility, on the other hand, is a clearance sale, and predators know exactly where to shop. Those same critics, they rarely follow their own advice. They urge you to be softer, more forgiving, more open, but they live behind fences they expect you to tear down. Hypocrisy is their native tongue. Let them speak it. You no longer need translation. As you vanish from the marketplace of need, scarcity begins to sting. Those who used you for emotional Wi-Fi start scanning for a new signal. Some will find one, but borrowed bandwidth always fails. Eventually, they remember you weren't a user, you were the source. Machiavelli warned rulers, "Be wary of allies who flatter." Today, that means beware the cheerleaders, whose praise is payment in disguise. Sometimes applause hides a transaction. The loudest fans may be the first to disappear when there's no benefit left to harvest. So you exit not just people, but places. Rooms where noise is mistaken for progress. Conversations where vulnerability is bait. You walk, not in exile, but in elevation. Sometimes you walk into solitude. And solitude, when chosen, is not loneliness, it is refinement. Diamonds do not shine in daylight, they form underground, under pressure. You operate in silence now, behind closed doors, in gyms, in libraries, in notebooks. The work is invisible, but the results are not. When you re-emerge, if you ever choose to, you do so not as someone seeking entry, but as a sovereign with terms. Treaties get rewritten. Access is re-evaluated. There is no pity in the new trade agreements, only parity. If the old guard returns with the same tactics, the outcome is already known. You'll leave faster this time, sharper, cleaner. Because detachment is now a reflex, not a decision. Walking away the first time felt like dislocating a joint. The second time, a stretch before the sprint. Eventually, you don't even pause. You recognize toxicity on arrival and pivot before it settles. Strategy becomes instinct. Instinct becomes self-preservation. Don't confuse this distance for apathy. You still feel, you still remember. But love does not mean you stay. Boundaries are not a lack of emotion, they are proof of choice. Love is involuntary, but protection is planned. So choose yourself, not with anger, not with fanfare, with precision. Quiet choices forge a future where your peace isn't a prize they can bargain for, but a fortress they cannot breach. The farther you walk, the clearer it becomes. The pain wasn't proof of connection, it was proof of erosion. Every memory you once clung to, Every apology you rehearsed in the dark begins to lose its grip. Not because you erased the past, but because you finally understood it. Those were not bonds, they were bindings. And once the knots are undone, you don't just breathe differently, you become different. The first time they message again, it's never bold, it's subtle, a harmless hey, an old inside joke, a photo from a better time. But you've grown used to reading code. Behind every "I miss you" lies a wish. I hope you haven't evolved. What they miss is not your soul, it's your softness. The kind that made room for their weight, their indecision, their damage. The version of you that sacrificed sleep for clarity, voice for peace, boundaries for approval. But that version no longer lives here. You've moved. No forwarding address? And now, the energy you once spent making others comfortable is redirected. You rise early, not to prove a point, but because the quiet before dawn speaks a language only the focused can hear. You train not just your body, but your attention. You don't post your milestones, you record them privately, like a sovereign etching the history of a nation that was once colonized by chaos and is now ruled by order. This stillness, this steady intensity, confuses the ones who thought they broke you. They expect flame or fury, but get cold steel. A calm that rattles more than rage ever could. Because what shakes them isn't your voice, it's your absence. You no longer exist in their economy. Your attention is no longer up for bid. And that loss cannot be measured in texts ignored or calls declined. It's measured in the echo, where your presence used to validate them. You used to run on emotional loans, giving energy to those who never intended repayment. But now your currency is clarity. You lend only to the worthy. Your peace is no longer purchasable. New people arrive, some sincere, some masked. You've learned the difference. The sincere invest before asking. The mask flatter before extracting. Machiavelli said mercenaries are the first to flee battle. Today's mercenaries flee when access no longer benefits them. You spot them easily now. Their compliments outpace their contribution. You give cautiously. Generosity doesn't vanish. It becomes disciplined. Trust becomes a trial, not a gift. A slow revelation, not a blanket offering. You are not a wall, but you are no longer a wide-open door. Ritual now governs your life. Each morning is a ceremony. Each workout a negotiation with your future. Each moment of solitude an investment. You journal not just what you feel, but what you've learned. What red flags you missed. What strength you found. What illusions you shattered. This is how empires are built. Not with declarations, but with dailies. Whispers return. Someone says you're cold. Another says you've become distant. Let them. A lion doesn't correct rumors whispered outside the cave. They don't miss you. They miss the version of you that kept them warm while they froze you out. And yet, you don't hate them. You've walked far enough to feel nothing, not numbness, peace. Because distance, real distance, doesn't just dull emotion, it clarifies it. You understand now that not everyone meant harm. Some were just unhealed. But unhealed people wield confusion like a scalpel. And if you're too forgiving, you'll confuse surgery with sabotage. So you forgive, quietly, inwardly, but you do not revisit. You can forgive without reunion. You can close the book without rereading the last chapter. Some apologies arrive late, but you're no longer holding the gate open for delay. You've left that town behind. Your new country has different customs. Here, self-respect is not seen as ego, it's law. There are nights the past knocks anyway. Not with rage, but with nostalgia. A certain scent, a certain date, a memory dressed in comfort. You feel the pull, the ache, and still, you don't answer. You sit with it, you study it. Because Stoics don't fight pain, they investigate it. And when you trace it to its root, you realize the ache is not about missing them. It's about missing the version of yourself who hadn't yet learned the lesson, but that version of you had to die so this one could live. And now, as you continue your walk, opportunities begin to bloom from the soil you once thought was barren. Projects take off, health compounds, wealth begins to whisper. Strangers start treating you with a respect that the familiar never did. Because now, without fanfare, you radiate what Machiavelli called virtue. Not just virtue in morality, but virtue in strength. Quiet competence. Quiet power. And the final test comes. A storm. A loss. A sudden blow. In the past, this would have shattered you. Now, it sharpens you. You consult not people, but principles. You've etched enough truth into your foundation that it doesn't crack under pressure. It bends. You weather the wave not because you don't feel it, but because you've trained your reflex to outlast it. And through it all, the greatest revelation emerges. You no longer walk away in anger. You walk away in alignment. You don't just survive the loss of others. You thrive in the gain of yourself. And if they ever return, knocking in shame or hope or guilt, you won't hate them. You won't even answer. Some negotiations are not reopened. Some silences are never broken. Because some chapters must stay closed. Not out of spite, but because you finally finished reading. They may call you heartless. Let them. Ruthlessness is simply refusing to feed what once devoured you. And you, now, are untouchable. Not because you built walls, but because you became the mountain itself. Majestic, unmoved, watched by many, reached by few.